Hey friends, my name is Dr. Dave Schramm. I'm a professor and a family life extension specialist here at Utah State University. I thought I'd share a little bit about what extension is, what I do as a specialist, and what it's like to teach and reach a statewide audience with family life programming. So first, a little bit about me, my background. I've been in extension right now for 16 years as a family life specialist. So 9 of those years were at the University of Missouri, and 7 of those years are here at Utah State University. So when I say an extension specialist, I'm like most every other professor in our department, and they focus on teaching and research, and I do a little bit of that. But 60% on paper of my job is extension. So extension really is about extending the resources, extending the research, and translating it into programs and principles that are engaging and helpful for Utahns. So that's really my work. I would say that my work focuses on primarily 3 areas, and that is positivity, happiness and positive psychology and meaning and joy. So that area, as well as parenting, is the second area that I focus on, parent-child relationships, and then couple relationships, marriage and intimate partner relationships. So those are the 3 areas that I focus on, both with my research and with my extension, which again are these programs, and I'll share a little bit about more of what I do. So with extension, it really, it's all over the place. How extension is structured is I'm an extension specialist here on campus. So there's 2 of us here on campus. And our primary role, as I mentioned, is really taking the research, extending it out, developing programs. And then there are our county faculty extension faculty all across the state that focus on family type issues, anything from grandparenting to health and wellness to money matters, children, aging, all kinds of topics that are related to family life. And those county faculty live in the counties, and they're full-time USU employees, and they are faculty in the fact that they teach and do the programming in the counties. Whereas as a statewide specialist, I really focus on the big picture and taking programs out to the county faculty who then can deliver them. And I also help answer questions and provide support for the county faculty. So a little bit about what I do specifically. And it really varies every day as an extension specialist. It's a little bit different, honestly, whether I'm putting together a curriculum or programs. A lot of my work has to do with getting out in the community and reaching audiences across the state, whether that is, I've done high school assemblies, right, on suicide and personal well-being, even bullying, those types of topics. And I go and do trainings, whether it's train the trainers, so training professionals, meaning family and social service professionals. I train them in parenting curriculum and in positivity, happiness curriculum, couple of relationships. I speak at conferences. In small little groups as well. And so it really ranges. But I would say that the extension has been transitioning, changing a little bit in recent years. The focus has been beyond just the classroom, the traditional, hey, come on Tuesday nights and we'll do a parenting program from 6 to 8. Now that has really transitioned to do more of online, so e-courses, blogs, social media, YouTube, right? I developed a YouTube channel during COVID-19. So a lot of this is getting on and using these platforms to reach broader audiences. A podcast even that I started called Stronger Marriage Connection. So you can check that out and see a little bit more about what I do as an extension specialist to help teach and reach this statewide audience across Utah. So now I thought I'd answer a few questions that were sent in to me ahead of time. Now, so I'll go through each of those and do my best at answering those. First question is, how do you assess the needs of your audience? Okay, so needs assessment, it's essentially about asking, what do people need? And how do we meet those needs? So what is it that they need and how best do we meet those needs? I would say that really in my work, I focused on needs assessment in really three ways. Okay, 3 ways, and that is through surveys, and that is through asking leaders and managers and those who work with the audiences who kind of have the inside scoop. And then I would say current events. And I'll break each of those 3 down a little bit and give you some examples of those. So I work for, I'm the co-director also of the Utah, the co-director, faculty director of the Utah Marriage Commission. So that you can go to strongermarriage.org and you can see a little bit more about the types of materials in relationship assessments and e-prep, these preparation webinars and things that we do on strongermarriage.org. So part of that role is to reach Utahns through a variety of extension services. So how do we go about then with a needs assessment? We actually had some funds to assess a statewide needs assessment. This was 2 years ago. And we did it through Qualtrics. So we partnered with Qualtrics and they surveyed Utahns and really asked them several questions. We wanted to know things like, what types of relationship education do people want? How do they want it? What's the best way? Is it websites? Is it a podcast? Is it through in-person classes? And then we even drilled down and asked them, if it was a podcast, what topics do you want? Even how long do you want the podcast to last? If it's classes, we asked them how frequently. Is it once a week? Is it evenings? Is it afternoons? Would it be online versus in person? How much would you be willing to pay if needed for these types of courses? So we asked all kinds of topics about their attitudes, their knowledge, their understanding. And then when we get all that data, then we kind of break it down by age group. We break it down by gender, by those in remarriages and step families, those who are divorced, those who are single, marriage preparation. So that's one way, is to survey our audience on a big scale. The second method that I use for a needs assessment is really coordinating with and talking directly to managers, these is leaders, these are community leaders. For example, if I'm going to go to a high school and present, let's say an assembly on suicide, I would talk to the counselors. So I talk to the counselors, I talk to the principal, and just get a sense of what the students need. Have they had suicides, for example, in that high school? How recently? How many? Is there bullying going on? What types of? So I assess strengths and areas of growth or improvement or weaknesses. So I'm really trying to assess, hey, if I'm doing a training for parents, or it's a parenting group and I know the group leader, or they've invited me to come, then I will ask them directly, hey, what is it that's going well? What do they need? What are the topics, the situations, the information, the principles, concepts, skills do the people need? And so I really rely on that a lot when I go and I travel and speak. I speak all across the country. I do a lot of keynote addresses and speaking, even on virtual keynote addresses. I've done many of those in the past couple of years. But every single time I ask the question, what is it that they are wanting, specifically what situations, give me the background, what's been happening, what's the culture, the climate like, and the relationships, because I want to be able to meet those needs, not just take what I've already developed and just give this canned presentation, but I really try to tailor it, if possible, to the needs of those attending. So I want to know even age group, age, level, gender, situation, whether they're parents or not, and whether they have young children, teenagers. So really, I try to get an in-depth assessment, and that's by going and talking to those who work with that group or that population. So that's the second method. And then the third method, I would say, is paying attention to current events. Because, COVID-19, for example, that was a big one, right? And life kind of came to the screeching halt. What was it that people needed, and where were they? They were on their phones. And so that's when I blew up on social media, and I had a social media team. I knew people were on Instagram and Facebook and on YouTube. And so developed a YouTube channel and tried to do short little, right? People wanted something short and simple. Their attention spans were short. So I did Dr. Dave's 2-minute tips, or a Thrive in 5 series of videos on YouTube to meet those needs. And they were struggling with parenting. They were struggling with positivity and mental health things. So I was paying attention to what's happening in the broader media, in the culture. What are the hot topics? And then I try to respond. And meet that need. And boom, here's a little video of Dr. Dave talking about this current issue. So it's paying attention to the current issues, it's surveys that I've used, and it's also talking directly to the leaders or managers or directors of those who I'm about to go and talk with. So I hope that's helpful. The second question that I was asked is, how do you take research and turn it into something that works for a community audience? Oh, this is a great question. How do you take something and then make it applicable? This is actually one of the most important skills in extension, because part of extending extension and going into the communities and in talking to an audience is engaging them, right? Engaging them, educating them, giving them some important information, as well as balancing it with entertaining. I mean, honestly, part of educating today is entertaining. So you have to balance both the content as well as how it's delivered. And so much of that is delivered through the personality, right? And just how you are as a person, because you can have the best information, but you've got to package it in ways that are engaging, that are meaningful, that capture people right where they are. And so part of that right off the bat is asking them, for parenting, if it's a small group, what do you absolutely love about parenting? And then I ask them, what are the challenges? What's going on? So I'm trying to connect with that group or that person, that audience, by sharing personal examples and stories and asking them. So I try to take complex principles in extension. For example, I strive to use what's called component display theory by David Merrill. Now, as soon as I say component display theory, everyone's like, well, it's way too academic. And so I take component display theory, for example, and I created an acronym called PIGS. PIGS, and it's just more memorable, and it's simple. It's present. The P stands for present an idea. The I is you give an instance from your own life or research or some kind of an instance. The G stands for give. Then I give the audience, or give those, if it's a smaller group, give them an opportunity to talk about that principle in their own words. And then the S in PIGS is they get to share. They get to share maybe a story or an example of how that works. So that's one example of how I take research or topics and try to translate it into engaging ways. The key is stories. The brain craves stories and examples, as well as a little bit of entertaining, keeping things light, and then moving on. But you've got to capture their emotions, and that's where stories and examples and even personal things, if you don't get too personal, but you can share things and then invite them to share. That's where the real learning takes place. So that's one way that I try to take the research and turn it into something that is engaging and touch, really trying to find what's most important to them. And often it's relationships, especially in this field, it's family life. Then you may be struggling with a special needs, 6-year-old or a teenager who's just really doing this, right? And so you get those pain points and what's really important to them. You hold up the emotional mirror of compassion, and you're trying to relate with these people. You listen and then express concern. Wow, I can't imagine how hard that would be. So your first job is really to be able to connect and then direct, right? Does that make sense? So it's connection, then direction, and then correction if needed. But in that order, always starts with connection. Okay, how do you receive feedback on the kinds of materials you create? Okay, so the feedback, I'll give you a couple of examples. I like to pilot test things along the way. And so I recently finished a curriculum called Road to Happiness and Meaning. And this has taken me many years to be able to put together and finalize. But along the way, I surrounded myself with a group of, I think it was about 2 or 3 people, and we met face to face, and I presented, gave them ahead of time. We met and talked for like a half day. It was like 4 or 5 hours in this room, and they were going through almost slide by slide and giving me input and information, feedback. And so that's one way, is having kind of this little focus group of these experts or people that I respect and asking for their input. What would you change? What would you add? Would you, what's a great story or example here that I could use? And then after that, then I put together the curriculum, and then I actually presented it twice to live audiences, and they knew that this is kind of the guinea pig, the version. And I asked them ahead of time, here's a piece of paper. I want you to actually take notes on anything that you would change, questions you have. Was anything confusing? What did you like? What would you like best? What would you improve upon? And that was wonderful, because everyone turned in a piece of paper with some feedback, both strengths and some areas of improvement, and things that they would change. And then when the program or the curriculum is finished, as it is now, I still like to ask and assess, what was most helpful? What did you learn? So I assess for knowledge and understanding and awareness, all of those types of things, because I still want to improve. It's never really done, right? I mean, it's finished and it's published, but I still want to know what is it that I could work on and improve. And so those types of assessments, I do follow-up assessments. I've done that with 1 to 2 month follow-up, a 6-month follow-up with different types of programs that I've done. I've done retrospective pre-post tests. So if you're just teaching something one time, and then you give a little survey. Here's just a few questions. What was your understanding or knowledge or awareness of this principle before you came to class and after on the same question? So before it was maybe a 3, and after it was a 4 or a 5. So that's what I've done as far as assessments, depending on the program, how many sessions, length, all that kind of stuff. So another way that I've assessed is just asking listeners. So for example, on social media and on the podcast, we say, hey, if you have feedback or if you have information, let us know what topics you want to hear about more. If there are guests that you want us to bring on. So that's a different medium, right? Podcasts is social media and videos type of information, but simply asking for their input and feedback. Okay, number 4, what is the most challenging part of your job? I would say trying to balance it all, because the extension stuff it's so exciting for me. I absolutely love it. It doesn't feel like work to me. And so for me, it's like, oh man, this is great. Oh, that is great too. And I want to chase that grant or this project. So it's really trying to balance and learning to say no to a project, because I'm taking on students, teaching a class. Someone asked me to come down and speak at their conference, or work on a grant project or a curriculum, or give them input and feedback. So for me, the most difficult part is really trying to balance all of it, and including work family stuff, which I've gotten a lot better at, because I don't like to take work home necessarily for me. Now there'll be some nights or weekends or something when I'm doing working on a project or something with extension. But I would say overall, that's the most challenging part, is kind of overcommitting to trying to do too much. Okay, what's your favorite part or most fulfilling part of your work? Oh, okay. I mean, like all of it, right? But I would say that one of the most fulfilling, I would say, 2 things. The first one is seeing a project or a curriculum or something that you've been working on, either alone or in a team, when it finally comes together. So the road to happiness and meaning, that curriculum that I've spent just years and years working on, that's very fulfilling to see this project come together. I would say using the creativity that I have hopefully developed over time, using that creativity in meaningful ways. So seeing a project such as the podcast come to fruition, or curriculum. And then I would say number 2 is seeing the lives of people change and improve, whether that's they come up after I've given a talk or a speech somewhere, and they come up and they say, hey, thank you, that was very impactful. And then they share a story or example about their personal lives of what they're experiencing and going through. So I would say the process of the creativity process of going through and developing something and seeing that all the way through, man, that's so gratifying. It's so very satisfying, and changing and improving lives, right? Because in the end, it's people who matter more than problems or projects or anything else. And that's the business of extension, is improving the lives of people. So I hope that that's been helpful as far as a little overview of extension, a little bit about me. The work that I do as an extension specialist. I always welcome, when students or others reach out to get in touch with me. It's david.schramm, SCHRAMM. So david.schramm at usu.edu. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or want more information about extension or any of the work that I do with family life education, because, man, it's the absolute best.